evening. First, I would like to start and welcome everyone to our annual meeting for 2026. Thank you so much for coming out on this cold night. And I see someone's enjoying some cake, so that's awesome. So that's great. So this part of the meeting is the actual annual meeting where we go through the articles that were warned. And basically my role is short during this part. I do the first one, which is to ensure that we elect a moderator, and then I turn it over to the moderator. Okay? So what I'd like to do is start with the wording of the annual meeting. And it says, the legal voters of the Addison Central School District are hereby warned to meet at the Middlebury Union High School in Middlebury, Vermont on Tuesday, February 24th, 2026 at 7 o'clock to transact the following business. Article 1, to elect the following officers, a moderator, a treasurer, a clerk. So what we're going to do is first start with a moderator. So I open up the floor for nominations for moderator.
I nominate Jim Douglas.
And if you would so kindly say your name and your town.
Lynn Dumoulin.
Thank you, Lynn. And so we have a nomination for Mr. Douglas. Can we have a second to that?
Second.
And the second was? Thank you. Are there any other nominations for moderator here tonight? Seeing none, then I'd like to call the actual vote. So all those in favor of electing Jim Davis or Douglas, sorry, for moderator, please indicate by saying aye. And sorry.
Aye.
Any opposed? You're elected. Thank you. It's good I can turn it over because I totally screwed up, so thank you.
He's a good fellow too.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Thanks to you and all the school directors for your hard work and leadership during the past year and throughout the other years as well. Well, next we turn our attention to the election of a district treasurer. Are the nominations for that office? Suzanne?
I'll nominate Michelle Warren.
Michelle Warren is nominated. Is there a second for that nomination? Barbara?
I'll second it.
Okay. Other nominations for treasurer? If not, we'll vote on the nominee. All in favor of electing Michelle Warren as our treasurer, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The ayes have it, and Michelle is re-elected, actually. Thank you for your service, Michelle. Now we elect the clerk. Are there nominations for the office of clerk of our district?
Michelle Warren.
Michelle?
I nominate Mary Gill.
Mary Gill is nominated for the position of the clerk.
Second.
Seconded.
I'm declining that nomination.
You are. Oh, well, that throws a monkey wrench in our deliberations, doesn't it?
All right, I'll take it. I'm going to pressure you guys. Go ahead. Who was the first, Diana? I'll get it after you, Diana.
Sorry,
Oh,
Mary,
Michelle.
Well, we're relieved, Mary, thank you. And although I need to ask if there are any other nominations for clerk. If not, we'll vote on the nominee. All in favor of re-electing Mary to be our clerk for the coming year, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The ayes have it, and Mary, you are re-elected. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary.
Thank you. Thank you, Mary.
Okay.
Article 2, to hear and act upon the reports of the school district officers. There's a very substantial document that contains the annual report of the district and the proposed budget for fiscal 27. Obviously, we'll get to a discussion of the budget under the informational hearing that will immediately follow the formal adjournment of the annual meeting. But are there any questions of anyone on that document, other than the budget that we're going to be discussing later? Don't hear any. We should have a motion to accept the reports of the officers. Moved by Jason. Or a second to?
Second.
Suzanne seconds the motion that we accept the reports. Any discussion on that? Any questions? If not, all in favor of accepting the reports of our district officers, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The ayes have it, and you've accepted the officers' reports. Article 3, to see if the voters of the Addison Central School District will vote to authorize its Board of Directors under 16 VSA Section 562(9) to borrow money by issuance of bonds or notes not in excess of anticipated revenue for the school year. What's your pleasure regarding Article 3? Move to adopt Article 3. Is there a second to that motion? Chip seconds it. Discussion on the article? If not, all in favor of adopting Article 3 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The ayes have it, and you've adopted Article 3. Article 4, to do any other business proper to come before said meeting. Barb?
Thank you.
So each year, because we have staggered terms, we have new board members coming in and we have older board members that have served going out. So in this particular year, we have 3 individuals who have decided that they won't come another year or run for election for another year. The first one that I'd like to highlight is Suzanne Buck. And Suzanne, she has been with us and way before my time, right? And she's been part of the Bridport infrastructure as well. She's a special educator. She has so much knowledge of both board operation as well as many aspects of education, and she'll be duly missed. She's always been our historian for the last couple of years, that kind of thing. And at this time, I really would like to thank her for her service and her dedication. It's been really awesome. And I know that the district head office has put together some things, so maybe it's appropriate to do that at this time as well. So thank you very much. And a little token.
Always remembers.
The next name is Tricia Allen. And Tricia, she's served on the board. This is her 3rd year. And I have to tell you, she's been such a light. And, you know, whether we're doing parades, you know, for graduation, it's just so awesome to have so many people, mostly kids, right? Just like, oh, hello, and all this kind of stuff. We're gonna miss her so much. But besides that, you know, she has chaired the communication and engagement committee this year and has done a lot of work with the committee to really get us, the board, into the community more. So I'm looking forward to really continuing that effort the coming year and take it, you know, where it needs to go. So thank you so much, Tricia, and we'll see her around a lot because, you know, she's a face at the library.
I'm
and-
still a librarian.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. And then the third individual is Ellie Romp, who is actually from Salisbury. She is not with us tonight. And Ellie has also been on the board for 3 years. And was an awesome voice. You know, she had really just such good insight as we went into discussions, as it involved kids, and brought an aspect that was really truly needed, you know, for the board and for us to consider as we made our decisions. So we also wish her the very best as well. And so the second part of the meeting, if there's anyone here running, will have an opportunity to speak as well, so we can get to know them as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Barb, and thank you, Suzanne, Tricia, and Ellie for your service to our district. Is there any other business to come before the annual meeting before we proceed to the hearing? Jason?
I just want to take a moment to thank our outgoing student rep, Whitman. She's done an awesome job. She'll be missed. That's it.
Thank you, Jason. I didn't have it on my sheet, and I skipped over it.
Thank you. Any other business to come before the district's annual meeting? If not, is there a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Suzanne moves, seconded. All in favor of adjourning the annual meeting, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the annual meeting is adjourned. Public information hearing. The legal voters of the Addison Central School District are hereby warned to meet at the Middlebury Union High School in Middlebury, Vermont on Tuesday, February 24th, 2026 at 7 p.m. for a public information meeting to discuss Australian ballot articles warned for a vote on Tuesday, March 3rd, 2026. The hearing to take place immediately following adjournment of the annual meeting. And the Australian ballot warning is on page 8 of the packet that has been distributed. It consists of 3 articles. The first is, shall the voters of the Addison Central School District approve the school board to expend $52,999,495, which is the amount the school board has determined to be necessary for the ensuing fiscal year. The Addison Central School District estimates that this proposed budget, if approved, will result in per pupil education spending of $15,638, which is 3.58% higher than the per pupil education spending for the current year. Second article is, shall the voters of the Addison Central School District vote to close Ripton Elementary School. And the third article is to elect 4 school directors from the nominees to serve on the district board for the following terms: 2 residents of Middlebury for a 3-year term, 1 Bridgeport resident, and 1 Salisbury resident, both also for a 3-year term. So to discuss the financial articles, let me invite our superintendent to come forward, Dr. Baker, and we'll see after her presentation if there are questions that anyone would like to ask.
Testing. Oh, we're going to try 2 mics and no squeaks. 2 mics. So my name is Wendy Baker, and it's my pleasure to serve as the superintendent in Addison Central. Tonight, you will actually hear about 3 different things. I will do a couple things that just talk about where the district is as a whole. And then Courtney Cron, who is our Director of Teaching and Learning, will talk a little bit about investments that students are experiencing and teachers are experiencing. And then our Director of Finance, Matt Carente, will talk about how we're planning to pay for all of that. So you should please feel free to ask any of us questions along the way. If there are things that are coming up on what we're talking about, because that's the beauty of this kind of opportunity. So please don't be shy about that. Okay, so this slide, this picture here was a picture that was taken at the first event held, maybe ever, at MUMS for all of our district K-8 students from all of our elementary schools. The Flynn came with their very large giraffes. And we probably had 200 kids that were, playing out in the mom's lawn. And that's how we began the year, which is the first time something like that has happened. And it was quite an event. Go ahead. So you have this presentation. You should have it in front of you or available to you if this is not turned in a way that's helpful to you. Is that true? Does anyone need a paper copy of that? Thank you, Mary. Mary's got some if you do. So what you'll see as we begin is kind of a little bit of some talking points around the state of the district. Our district is changing. You've read that in the Addison Independent. Obviously our state is undergoing conversations about changing, and so our district footprint is changing. We've gone through 2 processes this year, one of them taking 6 months in the town of Ripton, and one of them taking about 9 months, combining conversations in Shoreham and Bridport about how best to ensure that our kids have the strongest learning environments that we can give them. In Ripton, the working group determined that it didn't look likely that the population of children would rebound in a manner that would really allow for robust classrooms in the near future. And so the consensus of that working group, which was made up of both town leadership and district leadership, was that it was best for the school board to put it before the town as the time perhaps to close the elementary school as we now know it. Simultaneously in Ripton, there is an article in their warning to go ahead and expend the funds that are approximately what it would take to maintain the building. So that they will be voting on that as well on town meeting day. So if our voters determine that it is time to close the elementary school, then our charter indicates that we shall offer the building back for $1 to the town, and then the town would take it over and pick up the expenses in a transitional period. So that's where we are with that, and I know that that's been an important conversation for a long time. Most of the students in Ripton joined Salisbury in Salisbury Community School, and when I visit, they're quite happy there, which is good, and they are learning a lot, which is good. And the community of Salisbury has been very gracious and welcoming to this group of students who is also first in Addison Central and learning in a town that isn't the town that you're living in, right? So these are things that we're getting used to in that respect. In this budget, we also have Shoreham students in grades K through 5 that are going to be attending school at Bridport Central School. And in this budget, we have proposed all of the resources instructionally that are supporting those kids to be combined with the instructional resources that are currently in Bridport School. Because, we have some students that need to make accelerated growth. And so the board has chosen to reinvest any savings that would come from that consolidation into kids and ensuring that we can accelerate growth that has become rocky in a period of declining enrollment and just sort of destabilization that happens as the changes in Vermont have taken place. So our district is changing, and there are things that we're working on together. There's a lot going on in the federal context. We are, staying closely aligned with how we manage civil law enforcement efforts on the federal level, how we handle changes in the Department of Education at the federal level, how we manage our agency of education at the state level that's changing. And so we are in a time of change, but I think feeling very good about what we're doing for and with our students here to ensure that they are learning well. And that's what we have control over, and so that's what we're paying the most attention to. Any questions about anything I didn't mention in that slide? Or anything I've said so far? I want to introduce you to Dr. Sonia A. Feline, good wave. She has just joined our district, coming from outside of Chicago, and her job title is the Director of Equity, Inclusion, and Restorative Practice. sheet is taking many of the aspects of the strategic plan that relate to ensuring that every student has an equitable opportunity to succeed, and holding our feet to the fire relative to many of those pieces. And under her leadership, we have changed the way that we look at attendance. And we're proud to report that we have an 8% chronic absentee rate, which is, we don't want any percent chronic absentee, which means you're missing 10% of the school year. But the state rate is reported at 25, and the national report is at 28%, and ours is 8. And so, some of that work and pulling that together is part of the work that Sonia is doing to making sure that everybody has an equitable chance to get to school and to be in school and see what that looks like. So that's an example of some of the things that her presence has allowed us to do. Okay, Jason, let's go to the next one. I think I've shared some of the things with you that are on this slide already. The first part is just a breakdown of our graduates. You will see in my letter that is in most of the annual reports that are in the towns that I love being with our seniors. They are well-educated human beings, and it doesn't matter where they're going. What I can appreciate about being with them is when I start to ask them questions about what they think or what we should do, and they show me how they take in that information and make choices around that give me faith in the next generation of people who will lead our communities. And I'm proud of that, and I'm proud to be a part of that in that way. Other things, we've had several state championship teams. We've got a playoff girls basketball game going on right now if you get there in time. So we've had a lot of success on the athletic field. I think many people were probably part of the football team's experience, as Division I state championships. We had thousands of people at these games and whatnot, and so they were nice community events. We continue to have teachers who are award-winning and continue to seek award-winning and recognition, which is nice. 70% of our licensed staff have master's degrees, so we have a talented group, and we hope to continue to invest in them well. We also received accreditation this year. We're the only K-12 district in the country that has a dual accreditation for the International Baccalaureate programs and the New England Association of Schools and Colleges, which means that we set a standard and we meet the standard, and we are moving forward in terms of looking at what we do critically. And that's very unusual beyond the high school level. It's usually typical for high schools to go through that. It's not typical at all for whole districts to do that. And so we did that on a K-12 level, which it has set us on the course to think about evidence of student learning and how we can share that more often, and how we can think about that both in classroom ways and in data. Because they're both important, what kids do in the classroom and what they might do on a test. So we're thinking our way through that. Any questions for me on anything I've mentioned so far? Okay, then what I'm going to do now is go ahead and hand the mic to Courtney, who's going to talk about the investments in students. Whoops, I'm sorry.
I have one question. I've got a van from Rachel. You talked about the transfer capability. I would like to know if you have yet numbers for how many kids you think are going to be transferred.
Yes, so just for everybody, what you're asking about is the policy committee's work in creating an intra-district transfer policy for kids in K-5, which means, again, for the first time, as we kind of think about becoming one team, one district in more ways. If you live in Bridport and you work in Middlebury and you said, you know what, it would be a lot easier if I could have my child attend Middlebury because I work right here and it would be just work better for my family, you can now apply to do that. So there are 106 slots that are open throughout the district, and we so far have 23 applications as of today. So the window ends March 2nd, so the last minute, kinds of things will be taken care of then, and then families will know whether or not we have enough room to accommodate their requests by March 23rd. And that's been very well received in the district. Again, mostly not because people don't like where they are, but because maybe for their family, something else would work a little bit better. And if it works better for the family, it will work better for kids. So that's been a nice development, and I credit the board's policy committee who worked for almost a year and a half to try to find a way through that felt like it would be meaningful and helpful, and so Jamie McCallum on the end was the chair of that committee during that time. Okay, thank you for asking that.
My name is Courtney Cron. I'm the Director of Teaching and Learning in ACSD. I'm really excited to show you 2 slides about what we've been thinking about in terms of investing in the student experience and then investing in our teachers and staff in support of that student experience. Superintendent Baker just brought up our pretty recent joint accreditation in NEASC, the New England Association of Schools and Colleges, and the International Baccalaureate. And as part of that process, we were asked to develop what's called a shared understanding of high quality learning. So we have our strategic plan from the board, the vision of which is on this slide. And in my mind, we had a pretty clear understanding of what we thought kids were experiencing. But as we started to talk about this shared understanding, just about a year ago now, it became clear maybe our shared understanding wasn't quite so shared across all of our schools. And I think that's one of the benefits of having an outside objective third party come in. They hold a mirror up for you and allow you to see what it is you think you have, what you might need, and challenge you to think a little bit beyond where you've been. So Dr. Baker and I went with some of our regional colleagues from the East Coast and participated in a workshop where we brainstormed what different shared understandings of high quality learning might look like, met with other colleagues, saw examples, and then we came back and met with our district leadership council, which is made up of district directors and all of our principals. And we asked all the principals to go back to their schools and work with their teachers and staff to develop a shared understanding of high quality learning for their school. So I would say it was maybe around April of last year that we then had at the time 9 shared understandings of high quality learning, which was great. And as the accreditation folks had pointed out to us, they weren't all the same. So then we were tasked with taking these 9 understandings and synthesizing them again with that district leadership council, all the principals, all the directors, synthesizing those visions into one common vision for what it is we want students in ACSD to have the opportunity to experience in the classroom. What does it look like? What does it sound like? What does it feel like to be a student in our classrooms? So then we took that vision and principals brought it back to their schools and said, what tweaks does this need? We took all of your ideas and here's what came out. And then we made those revisions, and then on our opening day during pre-service in fall 2025, we set up workshops where every staff, faculty, teacher in the district got into groups and workshopped that vision again. And so what you have here are the 8 statements that came out of that process, and we don't think they're perfect, and we think it's a fluid, growing document, but this is what we've been working from this year, and these are the 8 statements that we think if you walk into one of our classrooms, every student should have the opportunity to experience this. So how do you get there is a little bit more complicated, and I won't go into all the ways and all the details, but on the next slide, I want to give a high-level overview of some of our current work and some of our work that we're just starting in service of that shared understanding. So this slide is all about investments in our teachers and staff, and I like to think about, especially this year, when it comes to professional development and increasing the capacity of our staff, what external supports are we bringing in and what internal supports do we have right here that benefit our staff? Externally, we have quite a large investment in several state and national nonprofit organizations. We're partnering with Teachers Development Group, a nonprofit out of the West Coast, who was here in ACSD just over 10 years ago implementing what's called the Math Studio model. Folks who participated in that then remember it very fondly and recall how effective it was on their practice in the classroom. So we've brought that group back, and all of our K-5 teachers will have, by the end of this year, had 3 full days of math instruction with that group. And we're hoping to continue that into next school year, bringing that studio model that we once had here back. We've also been partnering with the Ongoing Assessment Project, which is a nonprofit that started out of Vermont and is now a national organization that really looks at how do you use what we call formative data in your day-to-day teaching moments to inform instruction. And that has probably been the most highly, I don't want to say acclaimed, we've had the most positive feedback about that professional development of any PD I'm aware that we've run in a very long time. Part of that might be teachers elected to participate in it, so those who are participating really wanted to sign up. But it's been, it's had a really positive effect, and others who didn't participate are asking, are we bringing it back? We've also run 2 courses this year with Middlebury College, partnering with their Ed Studies department. We have a course on worldviews, where teachers are thinking about multiple worldviews, how to look at the world from different perspectives and the implications of that on their teaching practice. And then we also have Tracy Weston, whose background and doctoral work is in elementary math instruction, working with a cohort of our elementary math instructional specialists twice a month. And the focus of their course is filming themselves, and then they bring it back in a video club style and reflect on their practices, which is a really vulnerable experience to engage in. And it's a really great group of specialists. So those are some of our external PD partnerships. Internally, our instructional specialists actually serve as what I like to call embedded PD. They're in our buildings, working alongside teachers, teaching in classrooms, co-planning with teachers, and modeling what best instructional practices in math might look like or should look like. And in that way, it's not a one and done. You come to this day, you get overwhelmed with a lot of new info, and then the person leaves. But instead, they're there alongside you throughout the year. And we're hoping for at least several years to come that that's an investment we have in place in our classrooms. And I think I would touch on one more, what I would call internal professional development shift we've made this year, which is that K through 12, all of our teachers now participate in professional learning communities, PLCs. And in a PLC, you can look at research, you can look at data, you can look at teacher work, or you can look at student work, and it's a bit of a cycle. So for example, if you read an article, then you might debrief it, and the next PLC, you might say, okay, well, what data do we have to support the research in that article? In the next PLC, you might say, is some teacher willing to bring something that they've created in the classroom in response to this new learning? And you might workshop that teacher work. And then eventually you get to this place of looking at the student work, and it doesn't have to be a linear cycle, but the idea is we're really looking at evidence of student learning eventually. What are the products and the evidence that are coming out of our classrooms that we can look at to see what are our students engaging in and what are they learning? And that's a new model for us. It's not a new model nationally or in the state, but we're really just getting those off the ground in a meaningful way. So that's some of our current work. And then down here where it says developing work, Dr. Atheline and also Dr. Nellie Colazzo, our Assistant Superintendent of Student Services, and I have been working with the board's Student Outcome Committee to really think about, well, what data do we want to be collecting? What student outcomes are meaningful? How do those align with the strategic plan? What data do we need more of? What do we need less of? So that's ongoing work that we're thinking about And we know that then that's going to translate to more work at the classroom level in terms of what it is we need to be collecting from students. It's a bit of a mouthful. I might have paused for questions on the last slide, but I'm happy to take any questions now.
Could you define shared understanding?
Yeah, so shared understanding of high quality learning is, what do we all agree? All of the teachers, all of the staff, all of the administrators. What is our shared understanding of what high quality learning would look like in the classroom? And so this is our definition that we had to craft from the ground up. Does that answer it, or should I try again?
I think you should try again, because you did use the term shared understanding in your definition.
Okay, fair. This is something that we all believe a student should have the opportunity to experience inside of our classrooms, regardless of their grade level or their teacher.
And when you were discussing it, and when you were learning from other school systems, the concept is that each school system should have its own shared understanding.
Correct.
Okay.
It was a requirement of our accreditation process that we talk about this and think about it. It's a good question.
Is there any student input in that understanding?
That's a good question too. There should be, and there will be.
May I repeat the question? Sorry.
The question was there any student input that went into the shared understanding? And there was a little. We had our, Dr. Baker's gonna correct me if I get it wrong, but at least our student board reps and the high school student council reviewed the understandings that we had come up with, or the bullets that we had come up with, and give some feedback. But I think there's opportunity still for wider feedback, for sure, and possibly caregiver feedback. Any other questions? Okay, I think I'm turning this over to Matt.
Thank you. Matt Correnti, Director of Finance and Operations. And I get to talk about how much all of it is likely to cost. We had a mandate for 5 slides for this presentation, which I took to mean under 20, and have hit that threshold. So, as an overview, I think it's important to note that this FY27 budget is the 10-year mark for ACSD since we became a district. So this is our 10th spending plan that will be going before the voters on town meeting day, marking a decade of ACSD district operations. We've almost got it figured out. In order to write the FY27 spending plan, we worked with the board and the finance committee to set a financial feasibility target, which took a look at some of the prevailing factors internally and externally, which we'll look at in a second, and came up with a number that the administration worked with to create a plan that was constrained to 3% growth. We took this as a top-level target and used it as a guardrail in building our spending plan. You'll see later on when we look at some of the details that 3% was applied to the per pupil spending amount. The major cost drivers that we were considering when we looked at that 3% target, and we're mindful of throughout the budget development process, are kind of the usual suspects, the same ones that we see year in and year out. But this year, we had a strategic plan implementation. So again, we're trying to do things that the strategic plan has set out. That costs money. About $500,000 of new dollars are going into targeted investments in the equity, student success, and student wellness arena to help address some of the concerns that Dr. Baker and Courtney just spoke about. We also have healthcare as a major driver, so rates have been going up at a historically high rate. Our increase next year is the smallest in the last 5 years. It's only 7.4%. But if you look back to FY24, our total healthcare costs are up over $2 million. So that's over 4% of the budget. We also have new money that goes to wage increases. So over $1.25 million in new salary, which would reflect about 2% of our total expenses related to wage growth. And then the cost of goods and services. So inflation and labor-based increases for materials and contracted services tend to hit us as well. When we're talking about the FY27 budget, we try to break it up into,
Lynn has a question.
Yeah, that's it. My question comes a little bit out of ignorance, so I'm really asking for information. I don't understand why the school district is involved in healthcare for teachers. I want teachers to have good healthcare. I'm not a negative person. But when you consider the behemoth of the healthcare industry and the corruptness, they need power to power. Why not put the unions on that and let the unions deal with the healthcare? I'm going to use a nasty word here, but I won't. Because they lie and they cheat. I don't think that healthcare is a part of education. And I want teachers to have good coverage. I want all of us to have good coverage. But is bargaining for health care part of education? No, not to me.
Did everyone hear the question? So, healthcare is collectively bargained at the state level.
I know that, I can see that.
And so
It's not forceful enough.
AOE versus the teacher. But as an employer, we're also mandated by the ACA to provide coverage. As the employer, we are mandated by the Affordable Care Act to provide coverage to our employees.
Mandated by what?
The Affordable Care Act.
Obamacare.
We have to, as an employer, we have to provide health care, yes.
I didn't understand that.
All right, let's go to the next slide, please.
I don't like it.
When we're thinking about the budget, we look at it in a few different ways. So our blocks are a model that we developed last year to sort of chunk up the budget into the intent behind the dollars. And then we have a more traditional expense and revenue budget, which looks at things through the lens of our cost centers, sort of the areas of organization on the accounting side, and then the revenues would be the funds to match those expenses. This one's probably better to look at your handout if, unless you have great vision, but does everyone have a handout that we need? This is our summary of the blocks, and the important thing to remember is that blocks are for all funds, not just the education spending. We're going to get to that later when we talk about revenue, but all funds, all expenses are reflected in the blocks, including federal grants and things that offset ed spending. We have 7 blocks total: district operations, tuition to the Career Center, and for universal pre-K. We have our biggest block is block 3 for general ed staffing. That's salary and benefits. And then block 4 is the matching non-personnel side of general ed, so all of the supplies, materials, and contracts that go into our schools. Block 5 are specialized services, so anything that exists for students with disabilities exists in block 5, including personnel and non-personnel. Block 6 and block 7 were both sort of new concepts last year in the FY26 budget. Block 6 is where we have allocated all of our student opportunities for direct instruction, funds that go towards enrichment and the creation of opportunities for kids. This includes activities in athletics and other extracurriculars. And then block 7, targeted equity investments. These are what we talked about in the beginning of the presentation, funds that are directly related towards realizing some of those targeted goals. You can see here 5.1% year-over-year growth from the FY26 block summary to the FY27 block summary. The major change that we wanted to highlight is that in FY26, a lot of our special education costs were outplacements, so these were things that were kind of taken on a contingency basis. The funds that were brought in to cover those costs were brought in through extraordinary reimbursement that was a matching revenue to that expense, but if we don't show the actual expense, it's hard to, it kind of skews the year-to-year growth in block 5. So in order to better understand what's happening in block 5, we put the revision with outplacement actuals in to show that in FY26 it was closer to $12 million that were spent in block 5 special education, and that we're actually tapering our specialized services in FY27 rather than showing close to 8% growth there. That's also reflected in this bottom line here, which restates that 5.1% growth. That's 2.7%. And you can see that that's already kind of resonating with that 3% target that we looked at in the beginning. This next slide goes away from the blocks and into the traditional expense cost centers. We have our 10 cost centers here: general ed, student services, universal pre-K, career center tuition, transportation, facilities, technology, and IT networking, the school board and district administration, professional development and curriculum, and debt. And then we also have additional funds that are budgeted for the difference between food service expense and revenue. So the general fund usually picks up a little bit of the food service cost, and then a fund balance transfer. So those are our cost centers. You can see here, if we're looking at year-over-year change, 3% growth in general ed, 5.9% growth in student services. UPK was down 9.1 because we are restating the coordinator position.
Now we have a question in the audience.
What's the reasoning behind using both blocks and cost centers?
That's a great question. The reason that we developed the blocks was to show the intent of the investments in a way that when you look at just the cost centers, you can't tease that out. For instance, in block 3, we have the required general ed staffing. That is just the bare minimum that we would need to meet the obligation of the requirements that are set forth by federal, state, and local rules and guidelines. There are personnel investments in block 6 and block 7 that do not meet those requirements, and unless we isolated those and pulled them out, you would never really be able to understand or appreciate the magnitude of the investment in this arena or in the equity arena. So opportunities in equity are shown more clearly through the blocks than through the traditional cost centers.
And are the blocks also used for acquiring monies for for specific purposes that are specific to the block? Like, are there like different grant opportunities or other types of monies that you can apply for that are make more sense in a block situation than the cost centers?
I would say yes and no. I think in the sort of big picture grand scheme of things, we don't gain any ability to go out for more federal grants or state grants as a result of the blocks. But by segmenting dollars out in this way, we have a better understanding of how we could sort of grant ourselves funds in various ways to make investments in certain areas, create data loops that measure how do we know if it's working. And, or should we, buy it again next year or not, right? So that kind of trackability and traceability is an important part of the blocks that allows us to do that kind of investment cycling.
Thanks.
One more question.
Just a question on the blocks, but this is the second year you're doing it. Would you say that because, just as you've explained it, this big budget becomes a little bit more easier to at least pull things out of if you want to pull them out? I mean, for us, or for anybody who's needing to look at that. Because, that's what I'm, actually question a little bit, is that the block thing allows you to separate, and it's a little, I don't like the word transparent, but it is a way that you can pull things better, rather than just having list upon list. And we used to, 20 years ago, we knew what the soccer coach was getting paid.
Yeah, it definitely allows you to zoom in a little bit more. $53 million is a lot of money, and it's sort of it's like it exists in it's like monopoly money or imaginary. It doesn't really have a tangible value. So by splitting things down into smaller, digestible bites, those investments become a little bit more real, a little bit easier to understand, and a little bit easier to manage from a programmatic or financial standpoint, so that we can understand the building blocks a little bit better. In addition to the general fund, which is summarized in this top, we also have a summary of our other funds. So this is sort of the first time where we're seeing funds split by, or expenses split by fund instead of just all lumped together as we did in the blocks. We have other funds from consolidated federal grants. So this is Title I, Title IIA, and Title IV. We have the special education federal grants, IDEAB and IDEAB pre-K. We also have our medical services grants, which are Medicaid and MAC, sometimes also called EPSD, which are reimbursement grants for medical services that we provide on behalf of our students, to our students. And then we have some other miscellaneous funds that always come in each year. When we combine those two sources of funding, both the general fund and the other funds, we get our total of $52.9 million. We go on to revenue. So in order to spend all that money, we have to make it. And in order to figure out how much we're going to ask the taxpayers for, we have to back some things out first. So the revenues that we back out to offset education spending are our tuition, state and local grants. These are things like transportation aid grants. We have a small school merger grant that happened about 10 years ago, etc. We also have our special education block grant under Act 173, which funds part of our specialized services. We have revenue from the other funds, which were all of those other funds that we just looked at below the general fund. And then we have a fund balance transfer. So if it's a fund balance transfer year, we would see it come in as a revenue and then leave as an expense. Those things offset, so we don't count them in ed spending. We do not have a fund balance transfer this year, so you can see that that's zero now. After we have backed out all of these offsetting revenues, we're able to see what our education spending is, and that's the amount that we will be using to set a district tax rate. So it's 52.9 minus 10.4 yields education spending of $42,576,137. That is 2.9% different than last year, and that is that sub 3% growth metric that we use to serve as a guardrail for how much is our budget growing this year. Did we come in below the target that the board set for us? And this is the answer, yes.
I think we have a question.
Other question in the back?
I see that there's an enrollment slide next, so maybe that will answer my question, but I'm looking at the 2.91% difference and just looking to remedy that with the 3.58 per pupil in Article 1. Is that because the enrollment is also decreasing?
That's a good question, and we'll cover that in a second. So we have have our education spending amount, and now we're going to look at the next levels, which take us into enrollment, into the weights that are applied to our enrollment, and then ultimately to the district tax rate. So after we have our ed spending amount, we need to consider enrollment. This is a table that summarizes historical enrollment all the way back to FY 2019 and a little bit forward to FY 30. The box is around FY 27 for our projection for next year. This looks at each school, and you can see in the case of Shoreham Elementary and Ripton Elementary, those bands fade out and merge with the school where enrollment was transferred, starting in FY 26 for Ripton to Salisbury, then in FY 27 for Shoreham to Bridport. Overall, this table shows a downward trend over the last 8 years or so, but also moving forward, we're seeing this downward trend reflected in birth rates and class size at pre-K and some of the other metrics that are used to create these models. They're not perfect, but it certainly reflects a lot of the evidence that we've been seeing for years that enrollment is on a downward trajectory, albeit a shallow one. This chart is summarizing our pre-K enrollment. So one of the growth areas for next year is that we are going to be running 2 pre-K classrooms at Shoreham Elementary School instead of 1 that had been at Bridport. So we're moving that 1 over and adding a second. We wanted to summarize what our enrollment capacity for pre-K was going to be. The bottom of this table is our universal pre-K enrollment, so tuition that ACSD pays to third-party providers around the district on behalf of the students who are residents. In red, we have the Mary Hogan program, which has run 2 classrooms the last 3 years and will continue to do so next year. In green, we have Bridport, which has run 1 classroom the last 3 years and will transition to purple, where it's Shoreham. You'll see growth here up to 175 seats of capacity for pre-K, largely because we're running a new classroom on the western side of the district. Don't know yet how waiting lists and demand will work and whether or not we'll be able to realize the full 30 of enrollment there, but we're projecting that that's the number of seats we will have for pre-K. From those enrollment numbers, we create something called the long-term weighted average daily membership, which is the world's first acronym. We're going to add on to the enrollment that we just looked at, weights based on grade level, demographics, and district sparsity. Our LTW-ADM was frozen at 2,722.7 pupils. That is the 8th time that the AOE sent it to us, and it's been locked in at version 8, and that's down just over half a percentage point year to year. To the question earlier about how enrollment affects the bottom line number, a drop in enrollment will create a higher year-over-year percentage when you look at the per pupil ed spending because you have fewer pupils. So that's why you wouldn't get the same year-over-year there. To calculate the per pupil ed spending, we take our total amount, the big number, 42.5 million, divided by our weighted average daily membership, and we get $15,637. That's up 3.58%, which is obviously more than a 2.9% growth on the ed spending. The AOE has an excess spending threshold. That's another piece of the puzzle that we're always trying to stay below. They calculate that as a percentage of distance from the state average. It was set this year at 16,331. which means that we are at 96% of the threshold. We are below it by $694 per pupil. So that's a way of saying, we have avoided double taxation on any of our education spending and spent 96% of what the threshold would have allowed. The last piece of math here tonight is the district tax rate. We take our ed spending per pupil, per weighted pupil, and we divide that by the preliminary yield. This is the homestead property yield generated by the Department of Taxes and sent to us on December 1st in a letter. That also gets legislated throughout the session and ultimately voted on in the yield bill. And so it's marked here as preliminary because that has not happened yet. Using the preliminary yield, we can calculate ultimately a district homestead property tax rate of $1.65. I added this discount in. This is another layer to it. I'm happy to go into more detail on that if anyone would like more detail on it, but it's an extra piece of the puzzle that ultimately just comes off the calculation and gives us $1.65. For comparability's sake, we're seeing a 3.5 cent increase from last year, which is 2.19%. Any questions on the tax rate? For 2/3 of Vermonters, some or all of their taxes are based on income, and the state provides a lagging income-based property tax credit for income qualifying Vermonters. And so we wanted to make sure that we showed not just the homestead property tax rate, but also the income yield and the income-based calculation here. So for the homestead property tax rate, we're calibrating based on $1 property tax. One yield equals $1. In income, one yield also equals $1. Sorry, one yield equals $12,154 of income. So we have a 2% floor. We have our ed spending and we have the income yield. Our ed spending amount is 2.6 times the income yield, which means that ACSD voters would pay up to 2.6% of income towards their education tax bills. Questions on income sensitized tax calculation? The one thing that universally true here is that as we get into deeper and deeper layers of individualized tax bills, we move away from the district tax rate and we go into income eligibility, we go into town by town rates, we go into when a town was appraised or last assessed, we go into what's happening on the municipal side of the tax bill, not just the education side. And so an individual's property tax bill that ultimately shows up in the mail as a fingerprint. It's very unique to everybody's particular situation, which is what we really want to stress when we're presenting here. We have control over the district homestead tax rate and the effect that our spending plan has on that bottom line number. And after that, it's sort of the other forces that take over and ultimately determine an individual tax bill.
Question there?
So, in your first slide talking about money, but underline the word educational. So is that what you're referring to here? You have control of the educational budget, but you don't have control of how it affects individuals from each municipality. Is that why you underlined educational in that first slide? I didn't quite get why.
Can we go back to the slide? I just want to make sure I'm looking at the right.
The very first slide. That one. There you go. Education.
Education spending, so,
Yeah.
yeah, education spending growth, that was underlined because we wanted to say 3% of what?
Okay, that's what, and that's what you have control of.
That's what we have control of.
Okay, thank you.
But when we say, you know, if the board says, just don't spend more than 3%, we have 15 different ways that we can interpret that. 15%, 3% of what was an important gap to fill in. So this is where we say 3% of what, and then hold ourselves accountable to that metric.
Okay, thank you.
And I think that, okay, so there's one more slide here, thank you, Jay. Reserve funds, also a requirement to talk about these. We have two different reserve funds, education reserves and capital reserves. You go to the next slide. Capital reserves are voter designated reserve fund used for capital improvements, and they must be spent within 5 years of transfer. In FY25, we have a starting balance of 1.792 million, and then in FY25, an ending balance of 3.8. In FY25, the FY23 general fund surplus was transferred in, so that's where the balance went up, and no funds were used. In FY26, that's this year, 1.297 from FY24 was transferred, so again, there's a lag there. You know, in 25 we transferred from 23, in 26 we transferred from 24. And we're also this year approved to spend up to $650,000 in order to fund security updates at all schools. That input and output in FY26 is likely to lead to a FY27 capital reserve balance of about $4.47 million. We also have an education reserve, which is a stabilization fund to mitigate the effects of unbudgeted expenses or revenue shortfalls. There was no change from that 2.3 million in FY25. There were no transfers at all in 25. In 26, the board approved a transfer of 1.098 million from the ed reserves to the general fund to restore a zero basis after 3 special education accounts, which were outside of the general fund, were melded into the general fund, and creating a need to restore a zero basis. That leaves a FY27 balance in the ed reserves of $1,234,566 available likely for FY27.
Question?
How are the reserves held? Are they able to be invested, or what are they held?
The question is, how are the reserves held? Are they able to be invested? No. Yeah, it's taxpayer money, so we're not holding it in any way that we could take on risk. It exists as a basis for the district's net worth, more than cash in the bank, and is just sort of a parking lot for money to move from one year to the next. The only stipulation for capital reserves is that 5-year spending limit. So I want to make sure that the funds move through there and don't just accrue. Ed reserves are less limited by any kind of stipulation like that, just meant to kind of be rainy day funds. That's the last slide, and so what questions do you have?
A comment relative to the reserves. The reserves become, because we don't spend every bit that we budgeted. Correct?
Yes.
Which is,
Yes.
you don't want a deficit spend, so obviously you always want to be on the plus side. Some years it's bigger than others because of different types of things. But I think the reserve fund is just, like you say, moving it from one to the other, but we are also not deficit spending. We're spending more than we have allocated or taxed the voters for that.
That's true, and the only thing I'll add is that in the post-COVID era, where the federal government was distributing just a ton of grant money, that took a lot of pressure off of school budgets and allowed for pretty healthy annual distribution to reserves or fund balance for a lot of districts in a lot of years. And that's one of the things that's tapering right now as spending tightens up all over the place.
Any other questions for Matt on the financial and budget presentation?
And Matt, is it not true, the last couple of years, the board has held the budget to a small increase? So because of that, our reserves probably go down as, what's left over, because we're running a tighter budget as well, there's gonna be less opportunity for money to be left unspent, as in the past, because of that real stringent, like 3% this year. Correct me if I'm wrong, but that's.
I would say that Barb is right in that we are presenting to you budgets that are under inflation, even though there are many cost drivers that are sometimes 2 and 3 times inflation that we're working with, and we're trying to do that to be able to be responsive to taxpayers in the district, to really just try to keep those taxes just as low as we possibly can. It does mean that that we'll be a lot closer to that $0, place, and we'll be landing on a lily pad, so that we have to manage our money very, very, very carefully. And I don't know if we'll be able to do that next year. We keep working at it, right? But there's only so much that you can do before, you start really impacting kids, which I know that's not what the communities here would like to see us do. So we're working hard, at it, and it might be different. There might be some times that are different coming up.
Anything else for Matt? Oh, Mary Heather.
Just a quick question, and I don't know if you'll be able to give an exact figure, Matt, but in the capital reserves fund, can you give us a sense on sort of the expiration date or what percentage of that amount needs to be spent before a certain timeline?
Off the top of my head, no, but I can tell you that I did that calculation and I have it all on the spreadsheet, and I'm happy to provide that to the board. I guess the one thing I can say for sure is that the security update project, I think, used our money that was about to go stale first. And so we bought ourselves another year.
A little time, so that's not going to
there's
go
no
back
imminent
anytime.
expiration on any of the funds.
Thank you.
But obviously, the clock is still.
Yeah, thank you.
Other questions? Or comments? Chip?
I have one more comment, I guess. Over the last 2 years now, the district's made pretty big steps with RIPTIF and now with the upcoming joint Bridgeport-Shoreham. Many people feel that's purely for cost reasons, which is not true. It's from at least my perspective, I've been on the board a long time and also just been involved with it, it's for quality. And so I think it's important that people always understand that it's not just to reduce the costs of education, but to make sure that we have the quality that we have, which we can't gain in the really, really small schools that we're now having to face, not just us, but everyone. So when people look for a big number that's going to, look how much you save because you don't have that school anymore, you're not going to see that number very clearly. That's my perspective and my comment.
Thank you for that, Chip.
Yeah, one of the things that might be helpful to know, and we've said this at a couple different board meetings, is that not operating Ripton is a net savings to this budget of about $580,000. So that is part of what helps us keep it under 3% in that respect. You know, that's, every dollar matters, but you'd think it'd be a whole lot more than that, right? So, you know, the board has chosen to reinvest $462,000 into more supports for students in Shoreham and Bridport to try to accelerate that growth. And those investments, hopefully, when the kids are ready, will taper off relative to that. There are also additional investments in Salisbury, you know, as those two communities have come together that other schools of the same size, don't have in the FY27 budget. And, you know, the board's work in ensuring that every student has what they need means that some schools have more resources than others if the students need them, you know, and so it's been a pleasure to support them in that work. You know, here in ACSD and in other places of the state, you know, even if we were to have all of our smaller schools, you know, really in big schools, it still won't keep us, it won't get us ahead of the inflationary pieces that we're seeing. You know, we can't catch up that way. And I think that's part of what makes these conversations that are happening at the state level so hard. There's no obvious answer to those pieces.
Anything else? Well, many thanks to our management team for a great presentation, and we appreciate the presentation this evening. Thank you very much. As I indicated, the other item on the Australian ballot, excuse me, next week is the election of school directors, 2 in Middlebury, 1 from Bridport, and 1 from Salisbury. Happy to invite anyone who wants to introduce himself or herself to do so, who might be a candidate next week. It's not mandatory.
Go ahead, Jason.
Don't be shy though, Jason.
Hi, my name is Jason Chance. I've served on the board for 3 years. I am currently the chair of the facilities committee and chair of the finance committee, and I'm running for another 3-year term. So I live in Middlebury. I've got 1 in college and 1 who's a sophomore in high school. Appreciate your approach.
You do a great job on slides too, Jason.
We have somebody online. Somebody online, Robin.
Robin, is that you?
It is. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
So, hi, I'm Robin Staddle. I've thrown my name in the hat for Bridport with Suzanne stepping down. And I just want to say that I'm really excited about the opportunity to serve the school district and support the students' learning. I care deeply about equity in learning and ensuring all of the students are thriving. And I know that there are going to be many major decisions ahead of us that are going to affect our schools for the years to come. And so I'm just really excited to focus on this work and help support the school district in any ways that I can. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Well,
Before we
right.
close
Go
this
for
out,
it.
there is an open seat that's not on the ballot for Middlebury. So if you know someone, it would be awesome for them to do a write-in. If no one does a write-in for Middlebury, we believe there might be someone that's going to do a write-in for Salisbury, because if you'll see your ballot next week, and those 2 will be blank. I can't confirm that. Jamie, do you know for sure if the individual from Salisbury is?
Yeah.
Oh, you're here! Please. I'm sorry.
Hello, I'm James Clark.
Yay.
I was told by the board I should do this. And
Yes.
it sounds like there's a lot of work to do, so I'm throwing my name in as a write-in for Salisbury.
Yes, and say your name again real slow so everybody hears.
James Clark.
Awesome, James. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so
Thanks.
but there's still an opening in Middlebury, right? So please, talk to folks and, like if you're from Middlebury, consider it. We would love to have you join us. If we don't get someone to run as a write-in, then the board will need to appoint someone from interested parties in Middlebury. So, yes.
I'm new and ignorant. Does Middlebury include Waybridge and Cornwall or not?
So the way it works is currently based on our charter, each town, the small towns have one representative from on the board, right? We all serve as a unified board where we represent the entire district, but the way the board is made up of is one from each of the small towns and then 5 from Middlebury to come up with 13. 6. Oh, 7. 7, sorry. So much I can't count. And it's based on population, right? And so this year, Jason's, running, which is awesome. Tricia has decided not to, and no one has stepped up to fill that position.
And it's just Middlebury.
Yeah.
It's not Cornwall.
For Middlebury.
Only,
Yeah,
that's correct.
it's just Middlebury.
But anyone in any of our ACSD towns can vote for those positions, no
Yes.
matter which town they come from.
Yes.
Well, anything else to come before our hearing this evening? If not, thank you all for being here. Thanks to the board and our leadership team, and the hearing's adjourned.